It's ready.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for. Can we make sure everybody is muted if you're not going to be speaking at the current time? We are recording this event, so I hope everybody is staying safe. Everybody is doing well. Hope you got a chance to check out our board's message to the community in these trying times. If you haven't, you can either get it on LinkedIn. If you follow Thai Atlanta on LinkedIn, we did send out an email out to the community, but we are thinking about our friends in the African American community, a lot of our membership as well. So we're here to support you guys. Next slide.
I mean, you're not sharing your this slide deck. Please do share it.
All right. Thanks, Amin. I can see your slides perfectly fine. So what we've tried to do this year, even though a lot of the year is going to be virtual, is to go through each one of the phases of your company. So a lot of the organizations in the region focus on early stage, which is fantastic, but we want to focus on the entire life cycle of the entrepreneur. All of us, including myself, we're at different phases of our company's growth, and we have different challenges. So not only are we going through this this year, but we're also going to be building content library to focus on different industries that cross-section with all these different types of issues that you might be facing. For myself, having gone through so many different companies, a topic like building a board is an art form. Several of us who are 100% owners or founders of companies may not think that a board is valuable, but a topic like this today is really exciting because it can address some of those questions that you have. And then as the year goes on, we get closer and closer to scaling up the company and then focusing on what happens when you exit your business. So, Amin, I'm going to hand it back to you and we'll get started with the rest of the event.
Yep. And for those that are new joining, that don't know about us, our four main objectives are providing, education, networking, mentoring, and investing. So we do that through the programs. And for this evening, we're going to be focusing on the education and mentoring side of things. So we're going to cover the panel just here shortly, but then afterwards, we don't want you to drop. We've assigned you to a breakout room, and this is where the mentoring takes place. So the goal is that we have our charter members, mentors within the communities, the speakers. They'll be assigned to the rooms as facilitators that will kind of break down and go deeper into the conversation that they just broke down. But it's more so for you guys to also have that connectivity. And again, we know that the networking component is something that we do really well in, and we know that that's missing. But again, these breakout rooms are an awesome opportunity with some of your peers and again, have those intimate conversations. With all the stuff that we have going on, we do a lot of stuff for the youth entrepreneurs within our community. This slide deck with all the appropriate links will be provided, but we are launching a middle school boot camp, which is an envisioning of our high school program. It's a 2-week boot camp where they'll actually learn the startup fundamentals and then be connected to startup founders to present a case study, and it'll be a competition format. So here's some details, and we'll be sharing this with you via email as well. And for Q4, if you have attended TypeCon, we know that it's one of our marquee events where we provide a lot of networking opportunities, a lot of content, and again, just that great connectivity. And we're going to be doing a virtual this year. So the dates are 23rd and 24th of September. Save the dates. You're going to be getting some more information pretty soon about how that's going to be facilitated. We are using a brand new platform. We know that everyone has Zoom fatigue, so this will be a new platform, which is it's very intuitive. There'll be an on-demand feature. So stay tuned and save the date. One of the other partners that we have within the community, because we collaborate with a lot of the other entrepreneurial organizations really well, is Venture Atlanta, which is also doing their conference virtually. So if you haven't registered, let me know, let JP know, so that we can send you some exclusive codes that they've given us so that you guys can register. And more information on the VA website. And again, it takes a community to do what we do. We have a pretty good roster of partners that we work with who are our sponsors. All the representatives that we have with all these major firms are entrepreneurs themselves, so they love collaborating with our group. And again, consider them a resource. If you haven't attended any of their webinars, They can also be found on our YouTube page. So if you just Google YouTube Thai Atlanta, you will see most of those YouTube videos. But again, if you have any questions as you scale and you're looking for those resources, or even just looking to talk to someone about your particular business, reach out. We can help you get connected to these guys. And again, they're our partners. They do really well, and they serve entrepreneurs. Another great group of folks that also helps is that our board. You know, one of the awesome things about all this being virtually is that we have been getting excellent attendance from our board. You know, we have always more than half of our board that's on all of the meetings that we schedule. So again, let us know how we can help you. You know, we want every member to feel that this is their organization and that, you know, connectivity is just one email or one call away. So reach out to us. We're here to help, and let us know when you're going to be coming to the next event. All right. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Eric to go ahead and facilitate the panel. Eric's also on our board. He leads up our COBA advisory program, where we provide advisory board services for high growth startups. Known Eric for probably about 6-7 years. Accomplished entrepreneur, you know, very deep data analytics guy, and again, excited for him to facilitate this panel. So Eric, over to you.
Thanks, Amin. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We've got a really great panel here to discuss sort of why have a board? What should a board be composed of? We may talk a little bit about the difference between fiduciary boards and advisory boards, but it's not all that pertinent for this topic, because in the end, what you want to try to do is find a group of people that can give you, you know, appropriate advice and are compatible with your way of doing business and with the other board members. So we will try to explore some of that tonight in the panel, and then we'll go into the breakout rooms and perhaps dive more deeply into that. So first off, I'm gonna let the individual board members introduce themselves and give you a little bit of their background. First, we've got Becky Blalock, a longtime businesswoman in Atlanta, both in sort of large companies and some early stage ventures. And Becky, why don't you sort of give us a little bit of your background, please?
Thanks, Eric. I have served on a number of boards, as Eric mentions, of various sizes. I spent 33 years of my career at Southern Company. The last 9 as the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer. And in the second phase, I have spent a lot of time on boards, both public companies and on some private company boards. I'm on the board presently of a public company in Boston, a manufacturing company. I also serve on 2 private equity companies, a solar company and a data analytics company in Atlanta. And I'm on the advisory board for Tech Mahindra, which is a global 200 company based out of India. I also serve on the advisory firm to 2 venture funds, Seraph Partners and Valor Ventures, where I'm also an investor. And in the past, I've served on an additional public company board. I was on the board of a financial services company in Annapolis, Maryland. And I've had various success with early stage companies. I was on the board of a cybersecurity company that went belly up several years ago. I was on the board of a mobile company, Catavolt, which was successfully exited to Hexagon, a data analytics company, Verdico, which was successfully exited to Census, and then a social media chat company called IdeaString, which basically one of our customers bought us. Nobody lost any money, nobody made any money. So anyway, I have some scars, and I also have some success stories that I can share with you. Look forward to being with you.
Thanks, Becky. I just wish you had more experience, you know. Hopefully we'll sort of be able to round that out for you. Next member to introduce here is Vic Verma, who I think many of you know from his activities with TIE. And Vic was one of the early COBA companies way back when, what, 10 years ago now, Vic, I guess, something like that. So anyway, so Vic, please, your introduction, please. I think you're muted, Vic.
All right, can you hear me now?
More better.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. It's good to see so many faces and names of people who are attending this. My current position is I'm a president of commercial development for a publicly traded company called IBP. We are a 2.2 billion market cap company. I'm also on their board. My other job is I'm a managing partner of a radiology practice, construction, radiology, two different fields. In the past, I have been an advisory board member of Owens Corning Fiberglass, Johns Manville, Bank of North Georgia, which is now Synovus Bank. I currently serve on the national board of National Association of Minority Contractors. Also on the board of a startup company in Atlanta, which is related to temp workforce arena. Also on a board member of exhibits company called Blue Skies, which is Atlanta based. And I have a previous experience to be on the charity board on the Boys and Girls Club. I have been associated with TIE for a long, long time. I was one of the first one when Karen Robinson came up with the idea of the board. I was one of the first one to offer our company to be in the test run. And it's one of the best thing I think in my professional career I have ever done. I started my company in 1982. I got into the board part in 2012, and I think I was 30 years too late. So I'm a big proponent of an advisory board, the reason for it, how to select the right person and how they can help, because all entrepreneurs like me have a disease, which is we get emotionally attached to our products, our processes, our inventions, our way of thinking, and we have a real tough time to let it go. We have to have an outsider who can wake us up. And so I'm a big proponent of this. So that's the only reason when Amin called me, I said, well, if anything I'll be interested in, this will be this board, or this panel.
Okay, Vic, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and appreciate all you've done for TIE and all your engagement over the years. Third panelist is Lucy Ide, who is a current early stage entrepreneur. So she has a perspective of what does it mean to try to build a board, you know, as you're in that stage of your company lifestyle, and I think she'll share some of her thoughts related to all that. But I'll let Lucy introduce herself here, and we'll go from there.
Thanks. Glad to be here. And yeah, I think I'm playing the role of the still small company entrepreneur, and am the founder of Rimidi. We're a healthcare technology company based here in Atlanta. Founded this company about 8 years ago. And so I've gone from, you know, the founders being the board members all the way now through a couple of rounds of funding and, you know, rotating investors and independent board members on and off of the board. And, you know, as it pertains to where we are in the life cycle of growing the company and what we needed at those different times. So happy to share that experience. It's been a learning experience and journey for me. I'm a scientist and physician by background, so had never really worked in private industry, much less run a company and built a board. So a lot of learning along the way.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining us as well and adding your perspective to this. So as I said, we're going to try to explore generally kind of how do you build a board? Why do you build a board? You know, and I think, you know, Vic's comment before about if you get too close to things and don't have anybody to sort of bounce things off of, you sometimes get pretty insular, and that can sometimes be problematic. It's also true, in my belief, is that in these kinds of settings, every entrepreneur, every lead CEO, owner, whatever title you want to put on it, needs to have a sounding board. And, you know, your significant other will get tired of that pretty quickly. your accountant and your lawyer have different perspectives, right? And your best friend may or may not understand what you're trying to do, right? So I'm a big proponent of having people to talk to, and having a board of smart, dedicated individuals can a lot of times be very helpful in that. So with that, we'll start with a question for Becky. I also might add, by the way, that if you use the chat function, you can sort of highlight some questions or comments you want to make as we go along, and we will try to address them as time permits. So feel free to do that whenever the urge strikes you. So Becky, wide range of sort of topics relative to boards. There's private boards, there's public boards, there are boards for early stage companies, later stage companies, industry types, healthcare, fintech, whatever it may be. How would you, in that situation, kind of assess, kind of how much board experience you need to have people have? How would you sort of make the choice if you had 10 candidates? How would you assess what the right folks might be for a board, depending on all those factors?
Well, I think it's going to vary, according to what your needs are. As a founder, you can't possibly know everything you need to know to launch that company and get it to the next stage. It may be that you're really good in marketing, but you don't know a thing about finance. So you should probably have somebody on your board that has some expertise in finance. If you're selling to the energy market and you don't have any contacts in the energy space, then you probably want to look at somebody who has some experience working in that industry. Or if you're selling into the technology space, you might want to have a CIO who sits on your board. So I think it's looking at who you can add to that board that can add value to how you move that company forward. Being on a public company board is very different than being on these startup boards or even a private company board. I always tell people, before you go on a public company board, you better do your homework on the company because you are going to be held to a very different standard. Those entities are regulated by the SEC. So much of what you do in a public company is all about looking in the rearview mirror. And not enough, I don't think, we don't spend enough time talking about strategy moving forward. I think all boards are trying to move there, but you're required to do such strenuous financial reporting that we spend so much time talking about that, and you don't get to spend the time on strategy and on business development that you do with the smaller companies, which to me is a whole lot more fun and a whole lot more interesting. But the good thing about a public company is that the compensation is very good with those companies. If it's a company that's doing well, because generally you're going to get a pretty hefty retainer and you're going to get some stock options that go with it. But you can also go to jail and get sued if that company is not run appropriately. So you better do your homework before you go on a public company board. What I find with the smaller companies is make sure it's a company where you can add value. A lot of times people will come and ask me to be on their board, but if it's somebody that I really don't have any expertise in that area, then I'm going to be reluctant to go on that board unless I can help them with fundraising or and I also try to do my homework on the people that are running the business, because the single most important thing in these smaller companies is the leadership. Are these people that you believe in? Are these people that you think you can help get that company to the next level? If not, you can invest a tremendous amount of time and have absolutely no reward for it on the back end, other than some learnings. I will say the companies that I was involved with that didn't do well, I learned something from each and every one of those companies. Yes, I've lost some money and I've made some money. But even when you lose, the one thing that you get is you do get some experience. The other thing I would say about these boards is a lot of people want to be on a public company board. And I tell them that I think great training is being on these smaller boards. because I'll tell you, I spent all this time in corporate America, and when I retired and went on some of these boards, I had to call up my friend Wayne Kellum. I said, Wayne, I went to a meeting and they're talking about terms that I have never heard before. You know, I said, they're not talking about return on investment. They're talking about multiples. I said, you know, what do they mean when they say that? They're talking about Series A and Series C rounds and bridge financing. I said, these aren't terms that I have ever heard before. But I think that the more knowledge you have about what's going on with these smaller companies, they do prepare you for a public company role. And hopefully, if you're on the board of one of these smaller companies, one of these days they could become a public company. So it's a great thing to do. When I was a CIO, was not allowed to go on external boards. I wish I had, because I think that there are things that I have learned serving on these smaller company boards that would have made me a better leader in the position of CIO, because companies always were trying to, knock on my door and sell to me. And I didn't really understand how much innovation is locked inside a lot of these innovative companies that are very entrepreneurial in nature. And I think I could have done a lot better helping these other companies and helping my company be more entrepreneurial, because the future is all about innovation.
Oh, thank you, Becky. That all quite interesting. And, I think a lot of people that have sort of been down at least part of your road would sort of echo the fact that, boards are educational experiences, whether they turn out great or not so great, and you just got to be smart enough to try to learn from them, right?
Yeah, I will say this, because I didn't mention this, but culture is important too. When somebody is serving on a board, it's very important to have somebody that is a team player and somebody that is willing to be candid with you too. And I will say that I think the smaller, more entrepreneurial companies I've been involved with, the candor level is generally better than it is when you get to a public company board. And I think public company boards could probably learn from some of the entrepreneurial experiences out there, but you don't want to have somebody on your board that's not going to get along with the other people and who only wants to have their voice heard. So I would say that in addition to the experience, the personality of that person is important too.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good point. Chemistry, as in a lot of things, is a very important piece of all that, I believe. Okay, so Vic, you're up next, and I think the question for you, or the topic, would be, what kind of experience should you be looking for on a board? Becky talked about big company boards, small company boards, public, private. Let's talk a little bit more about, are you better off finding really broad general management experience for a board, CEOs, GMs, whatever you want to call them, or very specific, subject matter expertise, marketing and sales, technology, IT, whatever. What's your view about how do you sort those kinds of issues out as you think about building a board?
Since I did not build a public company board, I cannot talk about that much, but I am on the board and on a publicly traded company. And again, like Becky says, it's really, most of the board members it's more about regulations, more about Securities and Exchange Commissions and the compliance issues and the insider trading issues, controls, threats from an outsider coming on the board. So they spend more time trying to protect that stuff, which is not interesting to me. What is interesting to me is to grow the business. What are we going to do? There's a lot of talks about what market things. So I'm going to spend my time more on the private company side about the board. The difference in private company is that it's really every entrepreneur, in my views, it takes 5 personalities to build a company. You got to have a plan. You got to have some innovative ideas. So that's one part what an entrepreneur starts with. But then it comes down to how you're going to market that product. That's number two, marketing. Then number three is how are you going to have your processes in the company to run it. To run a well-oiled machine, you have to have processes. So somebody has to understand the processes part. And then it comes down to who's going to count the money if you're going to make one. So that comes to the accounting side. And the last one, which every company needs, but they don't have, is somebody who can say, it's enough. It's not working. We got to move on. We got to change. And those 5 personalities, most of the entrepreneurs like to keep to themselves. And it's impossible. You can do 1, you can do 2, you can be the ideas person, then you can do the marketing, but you can't be the accounting side. You cannot be the processes person. And that's when the advisory board concept really works. So again, the question comes up, when should you have it? Why would you have it? And who should be in it? So let's talk about first, why would you have it? I have firmly believed that every person in personal life or in business should have a mastermind group, somebody you can communicate with, somebody who gives you advice with wanting nothing in return. It's all about sounding board. That's every person needs, whether in personal life or in business. So you need an advisor, you need a well-wisher, you need a mentor, you need a cheerleader. So when you do something right, that's all why you should have a board. You need somebody who can do that. And when is the question. And first I was writing it, I said, when would somebody like to have a board? Should it be while you're growing the company, while it is at standstill, while it's going down? There is never a good time. And my views, always is a good time to start an advisory board. I did it in 2012. We had just coming out of the recession, construction recession. My business was still okay, but the morale was down. I didn't think I had the same culture in the company. The team spirit was not as good as it was supposed to be. So I did it to bring my culture back. And so I got in on the board side, and what we did is to have somebody from the finance side. So we had ex-managing director of a big accounting firm, somebody who came from the marketing side from Home Depot and had a business experience, somebody who was in the technology side, and that's how our board got formed. And so what I believe the perfect way to do this board participation is to find, number one, industry expert. If you can find one who is in the similar industry and have the industry experience, but then get somebody from the finance side. Finance works in no matter what industry are you in. So you can bring a finance expert and definitely bring a marketing expert. I'm a firm believer if you can market, a paper cup like this, you can market a computer also. It's the mindset how you deal with a buyer, and it's more psychological than just what you learned at the school. So based on that, to me, it's if you can bring in a marketing expert, a finance expert, and an industry expert, that's a good starting point for an advisory board.
All right, thank you, Vic. Just one comment I would make. Vic talked about a financial person being sort of a key in his mind. I would just sort of suggest that there are really, in my mind, 3 different roles that an expert financial person can play. One is in the straightforward, not uncomplex, but straightforward issue about keeping the books and making sure you can pass your audits and all those kinds of things, right? But the other 2, I think, are at least as valuable to a growing company. Second is, how do you fund your growth? Is it is it bank loans? Is it more equity? What are the various ways that funding growth can happen? Because I've seen a number of companies in this, in sort of the early stage space, their biggest limitation is how do you fund yourself, right? So that's second. The third one is, for financial expertise, is how do you either exit or sort of merge or acquire and all those kind of things. So, pretty good sized bit of breadth, I think, in the sort of three roles, as I would define them, that a corporate finance person could bring. And depending on where you are in your life cycle, you could look for one or more of those things in the individual you seek to bring on your board. Okay.
Eric, you're
sorry.
absolutely right. I just wanted to say that, how it helped us was bringing the person from the finance side. It really helped us on the exit side, something I was not even considering when the board was formed. But that person came from a big accounting side, and his expertise got us thinking, and they are the one who talked about, have you thought about an exit? And
Vic,
how do you prepare for it?
Right, and Vic, as you learn from that, I'm sure that trying to keep things stitched together from a financial side as you go is far easier than trying to recreate stuff when you're ready to sell, right? So all the paperwork and all the documents and all that, the more you can keep those, sort of organized along the way, the easier it'll be for you when it comes time to make an exit. So,
Got it.
Okay, so third member of our team here, Lucienne. Lucy, could you talk for a little bit about, from a small company perspective, kind of if you have any thoughts about sort of board compensation or kind of how that ought to work, and then also, how much time is it reasonable to expect from board members? They'll commit for a certain amount of time, but what's the right kind of ask, either at meetings or between meetings?
Sure. And, obviously this is going to vary over the life cycle of the company. So
of course,
it's easy early on because you have no money. So you can't, really afford to pay cash compensation, right? We're at the other end of the spectrum from what Becky spoke about with public companies. You can find pretty good data about ranges there, right? It's the standard range I've seen is from like 0.5% to 2% in stock options for board members of sort of early stage companies. Again, there's huge variability. What's your company? How fast are you growing? Et cetera, of what that might be. We have always paid expenses for out-of-town board members at a minimum, right? So if you're going to ask somebody to fly in, stay at a hotel, come to face-to-face board meetings, which outside of the COVID experience, I think is really, really valuable to have your board all get in the same room for a meeting versus having dial-ins, at least for quarterly. So that's sort of the floor to me, right? It's when you have no cash, at a minimum, you should be able to compensate folks in stock and cover their expenses. And then I think the level of engagement is going to depend a bit on what kind of board member and, what role are they playing on the board, right? And, a certain board member with a certain skill set that you've chosen at that point in company growth, right? If you have a seasoned angel investor, venture capitalist, maybe who isn't one of our own investors, but, and you're getting ready for a fundraising cycle, you might be on the phone with that person multiple times a week during that period of time, if that is sort of what they signed up for. So I think it's, it comes down to establishing clarity of expectations on both parties. And, why do I want you to be on my board and what do I expect of you? And if you're coming in as I've done 400 seed stage deals, then I'm really going to lean on you when we get into that investment, posture and time period versus, later in the company, if you bring in somebody for their connections in terms of opening doors on the business development side, then, I think as long as you lay those expectations out, that helps them understand, what is it I need from you? So I have not found that to be challenging with board members. I think if you do a good job of setting expectations, and we actually have a formal board agreement, and I think you can outline some of that there. I think with advisory board members, that becomes very important because people mean all sorts of different things when they ask somebody to be on an advisory board. So I think there it actually can be helpful to actually have an advisory board agreement and lay out expectations of, I'd like to have a phone call with you twice a month, or I would like for you to make these following introductions, or I'd like for you to lend expertise on a product. And actually put that in writing. And I think I mentioned on our call before the webinar that I've used our advisory board as a means to kind of get to know people, see what the chemistry is like, working together. Can they deliver on what it is that they're selling me on as an advisory board member, and can I deliver on what it is I'm saying, my company and vision is about that they want to be involved in. So it's a nice way to sort of test run a relationship before you make them a formal board member with fiduciary duties and all of that.
Sorry, thank you. That's very, very interesting insights, I think. We have a couple of questions that have come in on the chat, and they're somewhat related. One is, how do you find experts to work with you without them expecting returns back, right? And I think it depends on how much you want and how much you ask, right? But I'll ask the panel to comment on that. But the one that relates to it was it seems like a seasoned board member is going to want equity. And so I guess I'll ask for the three panelists to sort of comment on sort of that combined bit of questioning. Becky, perhaps you have a view on all that?
Well, yeah, a lot of people call and they want to use my expertise for free. And I've learned over the years to get more structured about asking what exactly is it you want from me. And if you want more than a phone call or maybe one introduction, and you want me to be on an advisory board, then you're going to have to structure a way to compensate me for that time. And if the company is bootstrapped, I'm happy to take an equity position in the company if it's a company that I believe in. I'm going through this process right now where somebody has just come to me in the past week and said, will you serve in this role? And the first thing I did is say, well, I want to know more about your company. I want to know what the expectations are. What is it that you expect of me? And then how are you going to compensate me for that? So sometimes you get what you pay for. If you you want to just have a phone call with somebody, then I think you can probably get some good information. But most people aren't looking for volunteer time for working on a startup. Somebody might be, but most aren't. And I do a lot of volunteer time. I'm on the board of 2 nonprofits right now. And they don't pay me. I do it out of my heart, but I'm not going to use up my knowledge and my influence helping somebody without there being some reward for me. And
fair point.
Honestly, you couldn't expect me to give you 100% if you're not compensating me for that. So.
Well, here comes the shameless plug part of the program, and that is that one of the places you can get a lot of semi-free help is with the Thai activities that we do, because we actually talk coaches into doing stuff for free sometimes. So anyway, so there's my shameless plug for what we do. But so Vic, do you have a view on all this? Oh, you're muted, Vic.
The boards.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yep.
The boards I'm working with, I'm getting paid by a very nominal amount. And in fact, most of them actually came to me and asked me how to form the board. So I really wanted them to get started for the first year. I was almost doing the same thing what happened in our company. As COBA, as you know, it was very cheap. It was $2,500 per person, which went to a charity. And so everybody donated their time to do this. But once the 3-year term was over, I didn't want them to leave. And so I actually converted the advisory board to a regular board. And that's when the compensation did go up substantially, but still not to the level what publicly held companies are. So there was no equity, but there was strictly for 4 meetings, a certain amount of the money everybody got, and they were available and we used them for phone calls, and there was nothing kept up with how much time they spent. So I was one of those lucky guys who got lots of people who did not want too much in return, but gave the advice.
Okay, thank you. And Lucy, do you have views about how you sort of can structure the right kind of relationship with your board members? I know you've already said as an early stage company, it's almost always got to be equity. And so then the question is, how do you find the right equity amount, I guess?
Right. So, I mean, I think some of your investors, right, we're a venture-backed, company we've gone through a seed round and a Series A. So you pick up board members usually as part of that negotiation. So those investor board members are not getting compensated, and we don't pay for their travel expenses. We don't, so it's your independent or outside board members. And, I still think in the early stage, like you're finding somebody who sees something in you, in the company, in the vision, and they're doing it not purely on the financial motivation of what they think those stock options can be, but they're doing it because they believe in the vision. And that's where I've had the best luck of getting people to really, be helpful, right? Is when they're excited about what you're doing, they're motivated. Sure, maybe the compensation, covers their expenses and they may make some money if you have an exit, but with the levels of stock options I mentioned, and they may get diluted down the road, right? They're not buying a new vacation home necessarily with that, right? So it's a balance of, I think, sort of them believing in the company, and that's really important. It was mentioned earlier, sort of the chemistry of the board and alignment. And, you want people on your board who, when you're not in that boardroom, are 100% behind you and cheering for you. And when you're in the boardroom, they can, as Vic said, they can try to talk you off the ledge of the stupidest idea you've ever had and tell you your baby's ugly and that you've got to rebuild your whole product, and you can have it out. But the second you leave that board meeting, right, you've all got to be in lockstep doing what's best for the company. So I think that chemistry and commitment is really important.
I think that's a great point, because I have never run into an entrepreneur who did an early stage company that didn't suggest things about the ideas and the baby being ugly and stuff that somebody in the board sort of walked you back from, right? And I think that's one of the big benefits, is that perspective kind of thing. So I think that's a great point. We are just about out of time. Does anybody have anything, any of the panelists have anything else they want to say before we cut this off? Well, if not, thank you very much. Becky, Lucy, Vic, appreciate your time and your insights. Do hope that everybody will hang in there and go to their assigned meeting room where the panelists and others will be present to help continue some of these conversations. Thanks very much.